Just after 7 p.m, the formal reception marking the inauguration of the mosque and the National Peace Symposium commenced in the hall, attended by hundreds of guests from dozens of countries. Following tilawat and speeches by dignitaries, Hazur presented the Ahmadiyya Muslim Peace Prize for the advancement of peace. The 2019 recipient was Barbara Hoffman, founder of ASEM, a charity that helps children orphaned by wars. The 2022 recipient was Dr. Tadadoshi Akiba from Japan for his efforts to advance practical proposals for nuclear disarmament.
You were one of the first in the world to recognize and protest nuclear weapons' inhumanity and evilness back on August 10, 1945. The second caliph declared on that day that it is our religious and moral duty to proclaim to the whole world that we do not consider lawful such bloodshed. Belatedly, the world finally came to the same conclusion when the Treaty on the Prevention of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, took legal effect on January 22, 2021. Words of your holiness give us direction. Regardless of its effect, we shall never give up our efforts to promote peace and justice suddenly.
During the keynote address, Hazur highlighted the true purpose of mosques.
It is essential to note that Muslims are commanded to build their mosques in the direction of the Holy Kaaba, the sacred house of Mecca, and to worship towards it. Yet, it is not enough to merely turn one's physical direction towards the Holy Kaaba. Rather, Muslims and their mosques must fulfill the objectives of the Kaaba, outlined in chapter 3, verse 98 of the Holy Quran, where it states that whosoever enters the sacred house of Allah enters peace. This Quranic verse means that a true Muslim, upon entering a mosque, shall himself enter a state of peace and, by fulfilling the rights and commands of God, prove a beacon of peace and security for others. All our mosques spiritually mirror the Holy Kaaba, wherein they serve not only as an abode of worshipping God Almighty, but are also a means of fulfilling the rights of mankind and establishing peace in the world. Just a few days ago marked the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine, and sadly, there is no sign of how or when the war will end. Nonetheless, this has not stopped certain political leaders from stating that once the war does end, Russia should be subjected to extreme sanctions and made to pay for its actions. Recently, a column by the journalist Matthew Paris was published in the Times, stating that such statements in advance of any meaningful peace talks are ill-judged and serve only to further inflame a volatile situation and reduce the chances of a peaceful settlement. The columnist wrote that political leaders should be above seeking short-term media acclaim and recognize, as he puts it, that the words spoken now can cast long shadows across a future terrain of which we are still ignorant. He writes that now is not the time to speak of reparations from a defeated Russia or to call for Nuremberg-style war crimes tribunals. I believe he is right to serve this warning. What incentive will Russia and its leaders have to cease hostilities if they know that their withdrawal will lead to their certain ruin? As I have said, Islamic teachings require for every effort to be made to bring peaceful solution to a conflict. For this reason, I believe it is essential to keep the channels of communication open and to strive to find mutually acceptable terms of agreement. If, however, the aggressor remains bent on causing misery and destruction and refuses to withdraw, Islam teaches that other nations should join together as one and use proportionate and necessary force to end the cruelties. The objective of the intervening parties must remain at all times to establish peace instead of seeking revenge or humiliating the aggressor. Nor should the underlying intention ever be to line one's pockets or to exploit the conflict to advance Western interests. Otherwise, those who have been demeaned will undoubtedly harbor a sense of injustice and resentment. Such frustrations are bound to eventually boil over and lead to further conflict, and so the cycle of incessant violence will continue to rotate with ever greater fury. Regrettably, as the columnist noted, rather than acting wisely, certain leaders and officials are making statements or pledges that serve only to pour petrol on the fire. Instead of helping to end the war, their comments reduce the long-term chances of peace. The world is well versed in supporting victims and those suffering injustice, as is the case with the Ukrainian nation at this time. Yet, it may surprise you to hear that Islam teaches Muslims to help not only the victim of the persecuted, but also the perpetrator and oppressor. Of course, this does not mean you provide the aggressor with the means of freedom to inflict further cruelties. Rather, to help an aggressor means to stop them from committing further brutalities and injustice. Whatever wrongs are being committed by the Russian state, we must keep in mind the broader picture that if the war is not brought to an end, it will lead to a deepening global crisis with potentially catastrophic results. Opposing blocs will become further entrenched. Hatreds will become even more deeply rooted, increasing the likelihood of a world war. Hence, as they continue to support Ukraine as it defends itself, world powers should also be making every possible effort to end the war through peace talks and good faith negotiations. Otherwise, I fear the war will spread beyond Europe and eastwards towards Asia, and who knows where it will stop.